Well, um, last week we talked about a lot, and I'm the kind of speaker, and I get this kind of feedback a lot where, I ask more questions than I answer. And I think that's a good thing, because given the conversations that followed up that sermon, I was both shocked and amused and confused. It's very interesting to see the mindset of our youth and the people who are opening their eyes to more biblical truth and the possibility of heaven and everything else. And rather than people being angry with me that there's only one way to heaven, people were more upset that there's going to be no chicken and meat in heaven. And the outrage, I hear you, I bless you, but I think the consensus of my last message was that God has something greater in store than your perception of what is good. It will be exponentially better. But with that, there's so many misconceptions of what we have about heaven. And so today I want to talk more about the nitty-gritty, the pressing questions we have, like we talked about last week. Will there be coffee? Will there be marriage? Will there be clothing and different brands? And will there be football? And how will we decide whose team Jesus goes on? Or someone asked last week too, they were like, Stan, for all of eternity, I'm going to be picked last for all the teams. I don't think that's the case, but if it is the case, at least you have the comfort of knowing that there won't be embarrassment tied to it, okay? There's not going to be like this insecurity about, oh, I'm last. In fact, Jesus actually praised those who go last here in this earthly kingdom that we know and in the scriptures. But before we dig too much into that, I do want to get a sense from you guys of what we've learned in this series. So I have a few questions. What have we learned? What did we start with? What is this whole concept of no middle ground? What are we talking about here? What have you taken? What have you learned? What are you excited about? What do you dread? Have you thought about hey, are my parents who have known in the church my whole life, are they going to heaven? Or is it possible that they're going to hell? Or the children you'll have, is there any guarantee, anything you can do to bring them to heaven with you? What are the pressing questions that you guys have? Because I hope it's not just about coffee and the fun things we'll do in heaven. Anyone? Let's get a consensus. Who's going to do what in heaven? Vera, what are you going to do in heaven? I'm going to start picking on people. I'm sorry. Sing? You'll sing. Yes. What else? Dennis, you going to bring your phone to heaven? There's this comment I read. These friends, they were all together, and their buddy died. And he was super rich, like rich beyond your wildest dreams. And his one of the buddies looks at the other one, and he's like, man, sucks. But how much did he leave? And his buddy was like, well, all of it. We will leave all of it. So your phone too. What else? What about hell? What did we learn about hell? We're going to burn. Yeah. Will we have memories in hell? Or conscious understanding of our pain? What else do we know about hell? It gets what? Downplayed. Why? Because Satan wants to trick us. He wants to downplay both hell and heaven. The place that he was kicked out of course, he doesn't want you to get there. And of course, he will lie to you that hell isn't so bad, that it is not eternal, that many will avoid it, that few will go there. What else? This is fun. This, like you guys know, this is my favorite part of it, to make you guys uncomfortable. What will we see in heaven? Or what do we want to see? Come on, you guys were so talkative last week afterwards, but let me try to recall some conversations. I asked a question like, what are some things we know about heaven? And a little girl shared that there was going to be like trees with a fruit on it. And then Mark was here, who's a lumberjack, and he's thinking in his head, this poor little girl's like waiting to see all these trees, and I'm going to be in heaven cutting them down. It's not necessarily going to work like that, especially the tree of life, but a lot of the things we know that are familiar to us here on earth, you know, you can see trees, you can taste things, you work and you do certain labors, there are shadows of the things that we'll do there, but they're not always exactly so clear-cut where we're just doing the exact same things in heaven. But what else? Mary. What's going to be your favorite sport in heaven? I told you last week there's no volleyball in heaven. Nah. You guys make it so hard. Will we be annoyed in heaven? Thank you. Yeah, probably not. I mean, given the newfound patience and compassion and love we will have, even if a unique personality that used to annoy you on earth, that will not carry over and be the same, especially in the way we perceive it in heaven. All right, well, we'll talk a lot about heaven, but what about the other ones? No middle ground. What was, Dima, your first message? What do people remember about decision and everything you talked about? I was gone that week, so help me out. Anyone? Now I know why you guys sit so far back, because you think I can't see you down there. Okay. Tony. Anything? Of course. All right, fine. Fine. You win. Again, I thank Ed for giving me that book. Lots to unpack there. It's been driving me crazy. I'm overworked, and I'm still thinking about like loopholes in the whole no chicken thing. I read through the book, didn't find anything. But one thing we did talk about is there's a mushroom here that tastes like chicken when you cook it. And I'm not against the idea. Or like, I imagined for some reason when I was like, it's been on my mind, this whole heaven thing. And I was like imagining, like, what if God, who can create anything, will make like a tree that grows type of cows or like types of steak? I don't know. But though we're caught up on those kind of questions, ultimately what I was trying to get through to your head is that heaven is not this far off idea, something that we can't fathom, something we shouldn't even think about because we're not theologians and preachers. Instead, heaven is going to be so familiar to us, but better. It's going to be building upon the foundations that you know. It's going to be where marriage on this earth is just imagery of what Christ is for the church. There in heaven, we will experience the best part of marriage, that intimacy with Christ himself for all eternity. And so our most pressing question was, will I see my wife in heaven or my husband in heaven? Will I recognize them and be with them and share a mansion with them? And all these questions, but the point is kind of missed where the big driving factor, that the desire that God created in your heart, that longing for intimacy is fulfilled in Christ. And though you won't need to eat certain things and drink certain things, he's still going to give you that desire, that hunger and thirst that you feel today, but only infinitely more satisfied in heaven, where it's not, how can I feed my family this week? It's more of, how can I enjoy to the glory of God everything he has made? Not only that, but he's so meticulous and caring about you individually that he's like a father who's a carpenter. And he builds all these things, and he puts all his effort into something and his workmanship and his skills, and he builds it. But then when it comes to making a nursery for his coming daughter or son, how much more care would he put into it? That is the Father who is preparing a room for those who follow him, those who love him, those who unfasten themselves from this world and look to his kingdom. And really, that was my goal in talking about heaven, is to get you talking about heaven. Questioning where you will be, pressing you between this middle ground, that you would decide here and now what you want. Not thinking, how will my life end? But how will my life in eternity begin? Will it be in suffering and pain, or will it be rejoicing with the Father who loves me? Building on my fellowship with my friends, the people I love. Creating a community, ruling and creating with everything that I have, that God has given me, exploring the adventurous places he has built. In this book, they were talking about how God is like an artist, and his magnum opus, his greatest work was us. The world he created for us, everything in our redemption and resurrection and everything there. And like this work, it will at some point be finished. What's God going to do after it's done? Will he retire from making stuff? Probably not. So if you think about like Genesis and like day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, these things that God created. You never knew what a cow was up until God created it. And then you experienced it. You learned about it in books and you tasted it. How much more can God create that you can't even fathom or imagine? Especially when you think about He's doing it for the ones He loves, the ones He redeemed and bought with the precious blood of Christ. So the question whenever you think about heaven is, how much more? How much more? How much more? How much more? Among the conversations last week, my favorite one by far was the one on sports. Will every game end in a tie? What? Oh, okay, yeah, I suppose. There'll just be no scoreboards. How about that? I don't think that's the case, and we'll get into some more stuff. But I'm not going to lie to you. As a youth, we're going to have to work on our athleticism because I don't want you guys embarrassing me in heaven. But I don't think we will care so much about people's skill sets. And we won't glorify things like that in the same way that we do here, where our whole identities get tied into something. It becomes our worship, our meaning. Those things will be done away with. And there won't be pain and even jealousy in those events. It will be all exciting, all glorifying God in the ways we interact, in the ways we help one another. But for one thing is for sure, that it won't be dull. It won't be empty. It's not this idea that a lot of people have that there's no learning, there's no discovery, there's no time perceived, no new things, that only the old will exist. Even I was talking about technology last time too, and someone came up and they were like, yeah, I never thought about that. I thought it was just going to be like horses and chariots, because when I picture Jesus, what do I think about? I think about robes, right? I think about the culture. I think about the first century of this world, like I'm thinking about old school stuff. Why are we limiting heaven and especially limiting God? Of course, God approves of technology. It's not evil in itself. And so I picture Jesus in a car on a golden street, just like we should, giving a lift. But one of the questions that actually comes up in this book is the accessibility of Christ. How, with all these people, how can we build an intimate relationship with Christ? Because we know that Jesus himself is a person. He's in time. He's in a place, right? So how will we all perceive him and be with him? How do you guys think? That sweet sound of silence. Huh? Telepathy? Again, I don't want to limit God, but I don't think so. I mean, if heaven is this spiritual, disembodied place, then why the roads? Why does he bring Jerusalem down, or the new Jerusalem down onto earth and create this new heaven and new earth? I don't think it would be fun if we got to fly everywhere, honestly. I think it's something that, like we were talking about, like we're going to have to build rocket ships and go explore the planets. We're going to create new modes of transportation. And all the while, we're not going to be worried about limited resources and harm to an environment. We'll have total dominion over all of God's creation. And if God used animals in this earth that we know now, will he not use them there in heaven? Only they won't be attacking us and enemies with us. It'll be a completely new reality to us. And likewise, we're thinking about the chicken thing again. I'm stuck on it. But if their appetites change where they're not pursuing us as their meal, why wouldn't our appetites change as well? Where God is unifying in peace all of his creations, as we read in Ephesians 10. His whole plan is to unite everything under the rule of his Son, Jesus Christ. And that includes the animals, that includes you, that includes different nations and tribes and everything else. But if being with Christ is the very heart of heaven, how will we have access to him? That was the question posed. The answer was kind of, there's no like rivalry between what heaven is and what Christ is to us. There's no rivalry between brother and sister seeking the attention of their father. Not only that, but there will be such a closeness and intimacy with God himself in his ever-growing presence there in heaven that you won't feel empty or desolate. Or even if we do have all of our own isolated homes, that we will not feel disconnected, but instead we will gather, and often we will celebrate and share the stories that we know. One of the things that we learn about the New Jerusalem is that it has 12 gates. It's like 3 on each side. It's 1,400 miles long. And cities are known, or the city gates are known for their gathering place. And in all the imagery that I read about heaven and what it'll be is like, imagine all of these gates which will never close for all of eternity because there's no enemy anymore. All of this is open to us and we will gather there. And these city entrances are where, from the beginning of time, people have gathered to share stories, to share news, to collectively talk and gather and celebrate and work and everything else. And if God's heaven and his idea of heaven and his teaching of heaven is a kingdom, and Christ being the king, then why wouldn't heaven be like a kingdom the way we know a kingdom is? He used familiar words on purpose. He wanted us to understand how it will be. So, if that's the case, what does it take to have a kingdom? What are the components, the factors of a kingdom? A ruler. Like a ruler? A king, yeah, absolutely. Queen, that would be cool. But in the context of the Bible, there's no queen, per se. But it's interesting to think about. What else? What does that make you in heaven? A what? A servant, a subject, but more importantly, a citizen of heaven. And not only that, but he says he will make us rulers as well. It's not just Jesus ruling, but we are extensions of Christ, extensions of what he wants in his kingdom. But as citizens, we have responsibilities, right? Not just responsibilities, but we also have privileges as citizens. That we have free will, but we are working toward a greater good, a greater purpose, a greater story. And we've never seen something with this much potential. All we've known in this life is decay, momentary things. All we've seen is the effect of the curse. And when we interact with people, there's always this sin lingering, this spiritual warfare lingering around us. We have bad motives, even when we do good. And the things we love and hold on to, even if you're the person that cherishes your memories on this earth, those fade. And if you're a person that cherishes relationships, those decay. But in heaven, the old way of everything is gone, and all that remains is the good. Another question often posed is, will there be resemblances of what God recreates to what we know now? Like the Grand Canyon. I've never seen the Grand Canyon, so I don't know. But in answering any of these questions, we have to think about who God is. What do we know about God? What is our theology of God? So use that. Will there be remnants of the old earth in God's new kingdom? In God's new version of earth? Yes or no? Maybe. The reason I ask so many questions is because you need to be opinionated. You need to do the homework. You need to ask the questions. You cannot rely on me or any teacher or parent to always be the one to give you this, and you're doing great. You need to get excited about heaven. You won't get there by listening to me. So what is your opinion? Will there be remnants of the old earth on new heaven? Yes, absolutely. Obviously not everything, but remember, God, when He created it, He called it good. Not only that, and we learned through the Israelites that whenever something major happened, God would leave often these remnants or statues, or He would make you remember these certain dates, and He would have you celebrate them because He wanted us to be able to look at something, and for generations and generations, it would be celebrated what God did there that day. God loves remnants. So why wouldn't He create things where we can now, as resurrected beings, observe it and give God the glory? I can be like, Dima, remember this day, this pulpit. Like, we fought for souls when we were here. Or you were a nurse and you fought for someone's life and you were tired. But you were the best nurse ever because you were a Christian nurse and you wouldn't give up. Or you did one thing or the other to the best of your ability because you wanted to glorify God. Why are there gates in the New Jerusalem? If God loves symbolism and remnants of something, why are there gates? All right, I'm just going to stop asking questions. I believe that God wanted to demonstrate this area of connection where once we were closed off from heaven, God brought heaven down, opened its gates, and made His home to live with us. And He wanted us to see it, to feel its walls, to be mesmerized, and every time we walk through it, to be reminded of God's open invitation for us who did not deserve to enter the city gates. But out of His love, He opened it and made us citizens and rulers. And not only that, but He will spend all of eternity developing us, loving and caring for us. I do want to try to answer some of the questions I asked last week. So, there's so many. What do you guys want to know? What do you guys want to know? Like fashion. Will there be fashion in heaven? If we have what? Clothes? Yeah. And from the evidence, when we read the scriptures, there is definitely clothing. And often we have to compare to what life was like for Adam and Eve. And then we do some thinking And we think, well, I mean, if we're not going to be embarrassed about nakedness in heaven, then why do we need clothes? And I think it's part of our self-expression as well. But when we read about heaven and the martyrs in heaven, they are clothed in white robes. And the angels are clothed in golden sashes. So I think there will be clothing in heaven. But again, it won't be in this competitive, like, oh, he has this sweater that I wore today. I hate him. Not only that, but God loves our identity. He loves it when we are unique. And all the things, I'll give it to you this way. Why did God make us so different? C.S. Lewis expressed his awe at the diversity with which God created us. If he has no use for all these differences, I do not see why he should have created more souls than one. Your soul has a curious shape because it is a hollow made to fit a particular swelling in the infinite contours of the divine substance. It's not only your body, but also your memory, personality, traits, gifts, passions, preferences, and interests that make you, you. I believe in the final resurrection, all of these facets will be restored and amplified, untarnished by sin and the curse. So he's basically saying, like, why did God take the time to make all of us unique? And all the things that make you interesting, different, all the things that make you unique, God cultivated that in you. So why would he not allow us to express it in heaven? And if we read through the Bible and we at the what's it called? Transfiguration, right? Moses was recognizable. And in heaven, the martyrs were recognizable. They had a memory of their past. So then why would we not in heaven celebrate our uniqueness that God intentionally created? Like our emotions. Will there be emotions in heaven? No, actually, no, there won't. All right. God created humor, did he not? Can we laugh in heaven? Can we laugh in church? Yes, depending on what. That's a good point. Definitely depending on what. And again, everything that we love, it will be in the version that is absent of the curse and sin. God is also said to enjoy, to take delight, to rejoice. He's also said to be angered, at times jealous. Will we also be angered and jealous in heaven? Depends the type, right? So all the things that we know, there will be a version of them that is not like it is here, that's tainted and unholy. If there is anger, it is over the things that anger God. If there is a jealousy, it's the type of jealousy that God has for his creation where he wants it to himself. He will share with no other God. Not only feelings, they actually weren't a factor of the curse, they were from the beginning. But then when it says in the Bible that there will no longer be, or he will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there will no longer be any death. There will no longer be any mourning or crying or pain. So if there's going to be emotion, why are there no tears? How does that work? Have you ever cried out of joy? Or every time you see Jesus, will we not cry? Out of just disbelief at this is happening, this is final. The crying that this passage is talking about is that of the tears of the oppressed, the cries of the poor, the widow, the orphan, and the persecuted, that these will exist no more. But there will be times where we hear overwhelming music created by our fellow brothers and sisters. Obviously not for me, but there will be tears when we remember. Because we will be moved, because that is how God created us. I think I'm going to have the worship team come out. Because honestly, I couldn't even begin to cover all the aspects of heaven. And there are lapses in my brain that do not allow me to even imagine the beauty of heaven to its full extent. But there is one thing that I do know. The heaven will be greater than anything we can imagine. And though we will struggle to connect all the dots, though we will struggle to put two and two together where, well, okay, I can't be embarrassed, but also, like, what about being picked last? And how will we drink caffeine in heaven and not also be affected because we have resurrected bodies, but we also want to enjoy it? And you're just juggling all these thoughts, like, how do we fit all this together? The point is that it's not for you to worry about. That when Jesus offered rest, he offered rest not because of the work you can do, but because of the work that Christ has done. And to the rest of the Father, he is the designer of all these things. He knows how to bring them all together. He knows how to redeem a broken and corrupt heart. He knows how to build up a community. He knows how to forgive. And not only that, but in heaven it said that he will serve us still. Not that he is retired once we're there, but that he will build up his children whom he loves. Not only that, but he will offer the greatest gifts that he can. And they will never end. And in anything we do, we will see his glory. And so I ask us to have that eyesight, that lens, to see heaven now not in its fullest form. It is just a shadow for now. But imagine if in this shadow, even the most miserable things can be overlooked to see the good. How much greater will it be in heaven where there's only good? There will be no more sin and no more death, no pain, no suffering, no loss. My message last week was that we ought to know how to get to heaven. We ought to know what heaven is. And lastly, we ought to look forward to heaven. But we can't do that if we don't ask the questions and dig around a little bit and struggle to understand it. But just like you will teach your children to see, to understand, to perceive, to walk, so will God lead you through His Spirit in understanding the depths of His love.